How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. We like your feedback. I think that's the most important kind of kick off here. We're back with the group. We're actually joined by Chris Berg, who will help us also kind of drive the conversation. Who helped us, write out the tokenomics for what we're going to be speaking about today. We're also joined again by Rick Sharif from the DCF, and then we have Dean, of course, from the Agoric side. So again, super excited to start the conversation off. For those of you watching us live, again, I appreciate it. You can leave your comments wherever you're kind of watching us. We're on LinkedIn, we're on X, we're on YouTube, we're in the Discord. So again, appreciate you guys for joining us today live. If you're watching us after the fact, I appreciate you too. That's even better. You get to leave your questions, you get to rewatch, you get to rewind and go back and just listen in onto what everything that says. So again, if you're watching this after the fact, I appreciate that. You could share, like, and leave your comments and questions, and we'll get back to those as well as soon as we can. All right, so I think that the most important part today is that we get through as much as the questions that we have. So I am going to be joined by the group right after this transition. So I'll see you guys in a second. Good day. Hello, everybody.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. From
Awesome,
many
amazing.
time zones, I think.
Many time zones, yes.
Yeah, so I try to do justice to the intros, but I do want to let Chris introduce himself, as the first time that he's actually on a Agoric Community Connect. I'm told also that he was on the econ committee for IST. So again, that's also important detail, but I want to let Chris introduce himself for sure.
No, I think I've been on a couple of other community calls, but some time ago. So my name is Chris Berg. I'm a professor of economics at RMIT University, which is in Melbourne, Australia. I've been working with Agoric since like 2018 or something along those lines. As you mentioned, I was on the IST Economic Committee as well. I'm an economist, but I specialize in in the economics of new technology, but in the particular case of crypto, token design, crypto economic design, incentive mechanisms, and so forth. So it's been one of the most intellectually stimulating things in my career to work with Dean and Rick and the team at Agoric and DCF to learn more about what can be done and how to get to the grand crypto economy that we know is possible with this technology.
100%. I think that I'm going to just kick it right off. I think my first question to the group is initial reactions to the feedback that we got. Anything we want to immediately point out to the group, and I think important that we'll make mention that we'll cover the majority of people's concerns.
Well, I think probably just in terms of like a little bit of context setting, a little stage setting here, right? We initially launched an open discussion with the community about the state of Agoric tokenomics, looking primarily to assess what changes were required in light of the change of focus of the Agoric L1, and to actually better align tokenomics with the value proposition of the L1. And so that's how this discussion began. And we had input from the community at that initial stage. We convened a small group of people that then got together and started working on the Litepaper. It took us longer than we wanted it to take, but that's no surprise in the world. And at the end of that, we produced what we thought was a cogent outline of a proposed revision of the mechanism. And we started with the mechanism instead of providing a completely detailed answer to the question of what does the new tokenomics look like. And we got a little bit of blowback from people that wanted more detail, but that's no problem. They're going to get some of that today. And some of those things, frankly,
not as much as they want, obviously.
some of those things that people were wanting as well are things that should come from the community, right? This is a community governed L1. Some of this is going to have to be determined by the community just by necessity. And that leaves a lot of room for creative design and interesting discussions with the community members. And I think we started down that path with the posting of the Litepaper. We did get some really good cogent responses to the white paper, to the Litepaper, with some good suggestions, and we are going to try to get through that today.
And we also, I mean, there's also fair critique of other things that people would like to hear or understand, some of which, we have in our head until we see someone asking for it. It's like, oh yeah, that's not obvious. Okay. So hopefully some of those get answered in questions, and some of them get answered, some of them are stuff that will resolve going forward.
These community comment periods are actually really valuable because, when we convene a small group of people who spend several months working on a paper, you get into I can't see the forest for the trees situation at times, right? So, the community shining light on the dark places is a good thing.
Just to be clear, that's not several months full time. That's, it's a background activity that percolates. We do drafts, we shoot holes in it.
And frankly, I'm glad that Agoric is focused on WiMAX. That's where you should be focused.
Let me be clear. Okay, on to your questions.
Yeah, and I think before we dive deeper into the questions, I think it's important that Rick mentioned, it's community participation. And I think that it's great to see the kind of initial reaction the first couple of days. I think there's still time, of course, to leave your comments. If you haven't already, join the discourse. That's where the conversations majorly happen. And then we'll share that link ASAP as soon as you can for those who are looking for it. I think we kind of mentioned it, and I think that it's important to kind of reflect on the core economic logic now that we get a chance that we push the Litepaper. So I guess I think, Dean, this would be a good kind of chance to kind of dive into what you wanted to kind of showcase for the group and in general to our audience. And I think it's a good kind of level setting to what to expect, and a good kind of chance to go over what we shared.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. Let's see. Can I just share my screen? I can. Let's see. Let's make sure I can share my screen. Do you see a screen? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So, I wanted to dive in because a big part of the tokenomics was driven by, we needed tokenomics that aligns with orchestration, right? We set up to do orchestration. It's all now about being able to control an economy that's off chain using our model to control stuff on EVM and other Cosmos chains. And WiMAX is flagship application that does that. So we're using that to drive what does the underlying economic, or at least from Agoric's perspective, what does the underlying orchestration and economic model have to do so that it provides value to WiMAX and WiMAX provides value to it and to build holders? And so I would always come back to those examples, and DCF is focused on the governance side, and the economists are making sure there's a coherent economy, and so those different perspectives all coming together. But I wanted to walk through sort of a concrete example. Here was an example in WiMAX. So WiMAX is create portfolios and control the capital inside of the portfolios across multiple other chains. So here was the set of actions to create a portfolio that goes to Avalanche on Aave on Arbitrum, and Compound on Base. And so this is an early view of the activity that happens from that, where it's going to create accounts on remote chains, move money to Noble, move money from Noble over to the appropriate EVM chains, and then on those EVM chains, deploy it into the specific instruments and positions for this portfolio on those instruments. So the instruments being Aave and Compound as appropriate. Beefy, Yearn, whatever it is that ends up being integrated in, those are all things that your portfolio might span across multiple chains. And so this was an example of multiple different actions, the multiple orchestration actions that one of the scenarios in WiMAX actually does, right? This was just taken from current beta uses and ongoing beta testing, right? And so, the thing that was really important about this was when we were poking at it, we realized that much of the fees, if I can go on to the next slide, that what's going underneath, right? User signs a thing. The execution fees, as we were talking about, okay, are we going to charge for gas for storage actions, for detailed execution in JavaScript, for orchestration actions? What are all the fees for those? All those would add up to still being relatively small value until the chain gets crowded, right? And when we priced out what was WiMAX all doing, much of the build that it's spending, and it is spending it now when it does this, is to pay for the remote operations on other chains, right? The underlying implementation takes build to pay for the transfer of the message over XLR and the gas fees on Arbitrum in order to make that account that you just saw. So in this simple example, where I'm just taking an existing amount from Aave and moving it over to Beefy on Arbitrum, it creates an account, and that would cost less than a penny to execute the instructions on Agoric, but 15 cents to pay the gas, do the transfer, and execute the instructions on Arbitrum to make the account. And it creates a new smart account object, which is remote controlled from the Agoric orchestration. Similarly, 18 cents, 70 cents, etc., because Arbitrum or Beefy Re7, when it existed, did a lot of work. The fees for that, and seeing that, we go, right, where build holders should be getting rewards from is the economic activity that happens, the behavior that we are triggering and controlling remotely, because we're taking advantage of all of the async architecture and et cetera to control that stuff remotely. That's what we should be taking advantage of. And that's where we shifted to a thing that was not in the first draft. And it's, to me, in many ways, the most important change from the initial presentation a couple months ago to what we have now, of taking commission here. These are the kinds of things that are obvious in retrospect, but exactly how you do it and what the commission is, those are all kind of important. And so the contract that is executing this remote transaction pays the fees where it would pay not $1.03, which is what this is, but $1.03 plus the commission. So that, be a dollar, whatever it is, $1.15, $1.16, of which 10% of that goes to the orchestration as additional orchestration fees. And then that's the diagram. And so you saw this diagram in the current Litepaper. And so the diagram of the flows, and this is sort of the core, how do we capture value? What we're talking about here is the contract pays, stacks up build to be in a position to pay for local execution and the asynchronous ops, and that those, reach out to Aave or reach out to Arbitrum and do and deposit into Aave or whatever it is. And this is the place where the commissions and fees are taken by the purser. The purser will distribute fees, and some of those fees are provided as rewards. Some of those fees are provided in acquisition of build and burning of the build, right? And so that's sort of the multiple distribution mechanisms. But this core mechanism of tapping into those economies was sort of the most exciting and important part of that transition, and I think is critical to us having a economy that scales with the execution utility of orchestration on remote activity. So that was sort of the fourth thing I wanted to walk through. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Rick.
That's okay. I was saying, can I just step in and provide a little bit of additional context here, because we are making a lot of assumptions that our audience is completely fluent with what it is that we're doing here. So just real quickly, at my initial comment, I'd said that one of the goals of what we were trying to accomplish with the Litepaper was to better align the tokenomics with, what's actually happening on the Agoric L1. And what you've seen on your screen right now is an example of how that would work. When the original tokenomics were designed, the L1 world was a different place, and there was a different business model theory at work behind that design, one that also included the existence of inter-protocol IST. Value flowed to build token holders as the result of those assumptions about how that economy would work and the existence of IST. IST is with us no more, and across the last few years, there's been real changes in the way that the L1s have gained traction. L1, the Agoric L1, enjoys a significant advantage, and that is the ability to execute these complex multi-chain, multi-block transactions via orchestration. So it made sense to us to realign the tokenomics to leverage that advantage. And what you're seeing in these exhibits from Dean is how those complex flows can be captured so they actually do deliver value to build stakers and to the validators.
Yeah, I'll make a couple of points. Zooming out again, I think the unique capability of orchestration both requires a new approach to tokenomics and the way we capture value, but also opens up a huge opportunity for business model design. So for application developers to create new, more consumer-friendly applications, both from the user experience, which is, I know, a big focus of WiMAX, but also just from a business model design perspective. Because orchestration allows us to do these multi-block async interactions with contracts across many different chains, we have to rethink about, well, how on earth are we going to pay for that? Because there aren't just fees on the Agoric chain. There are fees potentially on Ethereum. There are fees on Base. There are potentially fees across the entire crypto economy. What we could do, we could ask users to just, well, that sounds like a you problem. You're going to need optimism token. You're going to need Nia token. You're going to need all these tokens. You can manage it yourself. But that's not what users want. What do users want? And what is the proposition of orchestration? What is the proposition of WiMAX? It's that users want a simple experience. We know this has been a really significant problem from across the crypto economy, that users just want a simple experience, and we are not presenting a simple experience. So we've got all these new opportunities with orchestration. We've got this requirement to change the tokenomics, but also a new way to give users a better experience. And the way that we are proposing in this is that we have the contracts actually pay the fees. Now that's the architecture. So the contracts pay the fees and have the capacity to pay contract fees, have the capacity to pay the fees on the corresponding chains. So we allow the chain to, or the Agoric chain then facilitates that contact interaction with the other chains. Now, of course, any given business that sets up on Agoric can decide whether it wants to charge its users different fee structures to recoup all those costs. But this much more closely aligns the way people will interact with the chains, with contracts on the Agoric chain, businesses on the Agoric chain, businesses across the crypto economy, with exactly how we interact with businesses in the real world.
Yeah.
Businesses don't ask us to separately pay for all the costs of doing business. They just charge us one fee. If I go to the post office, I pay for a stamp. I don't pay for separately for the labor of the post officer. I don't pay separately to rent a truck so that it can be my post can be delivered. I just pay one fee, and this allows businesses using the Agoric technology to just charge one fee. So I know we'll talk about the details about, well, what are those fees and how much will they cost? But I think this is actually quite a revolutionary redesign of the way we interact with the crypto economy in an embarrassing way. Because why haven't we been able to interact with the crypto economy this way from the start? It's obvious if you think about it. And I think, the conversations that Rick and Dean and the rest of our colleagues have had as we've been thinking about this, it is kind of bizarre that the crypto economy works in the way it does, because no other business works that way. And frankly, I think the failure to align incentives like we're aligning incentives has been a explanation for some of the disappointing experiences that people have had when they've used crypto tools.
And Chris, that to me is the most exciting part of this. And I know that a lot of people have gotten really caught up in, I wanted details about inflation rate, or I wanted details about token supply. Okay, great, we can talk about those. But what I'm hoping people take away from this discussion is this realization that there's a different way of doing things that's being put forward here. And it's potentially revolutionary in that it unlocks opportunities for developers to control better their fee structures. And it makes it easier, much easier, for users to interact in more complex DeFi strategies. I mean, I've been in the crypto world for many, many years. I'm a DeFi user, but frankly, I'm not a big heavyweight DeFi user because I find it to be such a pain in the ass. I'm really looking forward to WineX because it's going to.
We have a product for you.
Yeah, exactly. To me, that's exciting. And if Agoric unlocks that capability, it's huge, not just for things that Agoric builds, but for things other people want to build. And that to me is the exciting part about what we've proposed here. And I think it hasn't gotten nearly enough attention in the community discussions. Oh, by the way, I should say this, there's a really great blog post that dives more deeply into this on the dcfoundation.io website that was published by the economist Jason Potts, who also assisted with the Litepaper design. That's worth looking at if you haven't done so already. It takes a much deeper dive into how this mechanism exactly changes the incentive alignment within DeFi economies.
So I apologize for diving into implementation mechanics.
No, this is cool. We're going to get there at the end of the day. It's all going to happen.
Thank you for the reset. Yeah.
I think that takes us right into one of the first questions that came up from the discussions with community and some of the commentary. I think we did a really good job right now of kind of exploring the other side of something that's risk adverse. And I think that when you talk about, you got to risk it for the biscuit. So I think in our mechanism design, what risks did we kind of intentionally accept by trying to do it this way? I think that's a concern from community. What is the risk we're taking by doing it this way?
It's an interesting question. So look, this model is actually designed to be pretty resilient to a range of scenarios. We haven't made a particular bet on the size of the crypto economy. We're not assuming that we're going to get X amount of revenue to compensate for X amount of activity. One of the reasons that we didn't jump in and present particular fee structures and particular targets is precisely because we want to, first of all, we're writing a light paper. So we didn't put in the fee schedule there, but that's going to change over time. So there might be more activity from one particular app, or users might demand a type of activity in a different way. And so through governance, the Agoric community might want to vary different prices. Now, so all we're providing is, or all we're proposing in this particular light paper is sort of an economic incentive structure, because we want it to be resilient to the changing nature and use patterns of both Agoric and the rest of the crypto economy, so that the community can identify opportunities and jump on them when they see fit.
I think to go back to the initial question about risk, one of the things that is built into this that is a risk factor, but we've added mitigation, we can talk about that in a second, is the fact that synchronous fees that occur on the Agoric L1 continue to, synchronous operations on the Agoric L1 continue to operate even if the contract's performance bond and their purse is empty. And we did that so that there would continue to be uninterrupted operations. Asynchronous operations are halted in that scenario, but synchronous can continue. Given that it is theoretically possible, though highly unlikely, that a negative balance of some significance could result from that. But that's something that would be controlled by governance parameters as well. So there is some risk there, but I think the mitigations are meaningful, and I think the potential downside from that risk is actually quite limited.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, that was sort of deliberate to simplify to enable smart contracts that the community likes to just live and run, right? Because they're only using, you know, native gas on the chain, and to make it so that, you know, if you're deploying an application, you know, the resource management stuff is not in the way of getting stuff out and getting it working, and getting it deployed and scaling it and all that sort of stuff, right? You would love to have an application that got way busier than expected, right?
And the native gas costs on Agoric are really nominal.
Yeah, for now.
Is this, and then we kind of briefly touched on this earlier. Would we consider supplying like a baseline model of like the supply, inflation range, burn splits, things like that, just so that community could just get like it's like a baseline understanding and evaluate it to some extent?
A proposed set of preliminary.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean,
I think
so
that
one
could
of the things
certainly be in the cards.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that there are things we didn't actually touch on, like the inflation rate, because we're not changing that mechanism. One of the things we were trying to do was only change the things that we had to change. I mean, you know, we could all geek out about potential economics of how we build stuff to do fancier and fancier economy. You know, I want to ship product and measure it instead and only do incremental changes. And so the inflation rate mechanism that's built into the system, the emissions rate mechanism you know, I can imagine lots of improvements, none of which will move the needle on things. You know, what we need is something that ties the orchestration growth to build holder value. So the current inflation rate of 5%, you know, that's order of magnitude right. Maybe it should be 4%, maybe it should be 3%. There have been discussions about that. Changing that is straightforward, and something that we should do, you know, and consider, but it's not a change in the approach or mechanism. And so that's why it's not a part of the proposal. So, you know, the commission rate is, you know, I mean, in the community discussion in response to one of the questions, you know, I proposed, okay, great, let's take 10%, right? Start there. Is there a model that says that's the right thing? Not yet, because we don't see rates of execution yet and the number of operations yet. And so we just we need more of those measurements we'll get over time. Changing between 10 and 20% is pretty straightforward, right? That's not an architectural change. That's not a qualitative or conceptual change. That's an adjustment in the economics as we roll this stuff out.
And go ahead, Chris, please.
And the community may decide to make business choices around some of those fees as well. So, for example, the community might decide that the fee needs to be really, really low to begin. And then once there's a lot of activity, then we can ramp the fee up. Because this will be an active competitive advantage for Agoric and orchestration and WiMAX. It also may be in response to the demands and needs of app developers too.
Yeah, I think we took the right approach. And sorry, it's a little self-validating, I know. Forgive me, everybody. I think we took the right approach in the sense that we went after the bigger fish to fry, which is getting the mechanism created that gives optionality and room for a creative design space that we can then implement via parameter discussions. That's what we were trying to accomplish with this, and hopefully we did. You know, don't forget, you know, we're definitely on board with the idea of looking at revising the inflation rate. Just a couple of months ago, I put up a proposal to reduce the inflation rate, and it wound up not getting traction with the community. So, you know, those things are definitely in the cards. We're definitely thinking about them. There's room for those things, but right now the important part is to get the mechanism right.
Yeah, and I think important to kind of reiterate as much as we can, community participation very important, and we will share that Discourse link again. So whatever you hear now, and if you have a comment, that's definitely the best place to do it. And then timestamp it, send us a clip or wherever you kind of see fit to kind of help make your points. And of course, we could provide transcripts of this conversation today as well. I'll make sure just somebody send me a reminder from community. For sure, we'll get that done. I think a good point here. So we're saying it's good conversation so far. I think what happens is that when we do give simulation or examples of things, how should community members look at what we're giving them so that it doesn't become an assumption, or they treat the examples that we give as a commitment?
Well, it's all up to the community. It is a community-run organization, so we can provide suggestions, we can provide proposals, just as any other community member can provide proposals. So what we've been excited by in the conversation so far is obviously feedback, but also just the discussion about the potential parameters that might be. We will consider and probably make proposals as well. But what we're excited to see is the community coming to some sort of alignment or consensus about what everybody wants. We are just community members in that sense.
The other thing that I think I'd like to see, is this is not the end state, right? An example of something that we had a lot of discussion about and various options, and we could imagine various dynamic automation and stuff like that, is, as in that chart that shows the various paths of the rewards, which is maybe too deep, but we could go back to, where fees come in and they are dispersed either by, they either are burned or they're provided to as fees to stakers, both of which are reward to build stakers. Those mechanics, should change when the amount being consumed exceeds the emissions rate, either by emissions being dropped or, of course, ideally by the fees and whatnot exceeding that. That will happen, as more orchestration activity happens. And, everything is driven, and in some sense, the critical important thing is growing the orchestration activity, growing the activity on chain, but especially the orchestration activity. And when that happens, it will be a lot more clear whether, like we burn up to the emissions rate and then start adding it into rewards, or we then split 50-50, or everything should go into the community pool because now there's a bunch of active contracts, or all these kinds of things. And we can have a plan and a design and do a bunch of work for automating how that'll all work, when that happens. But I think it's not going to happen suddenly. And the amount that we will understand about what to go and the amount of engagement we'll have from the community about what to do there as we get close to that threshold will drive what the right answer is, right? And that will determine whether it is, whether build becomes neutral, so fixed amount, and whether the emissions rate stays with the burn rate, or whether it becomes deflationary because the fee and burn rate exceeds the emission rate, or what have you. And the nice thing is the core incentive and executions around scaling the use of orchestration, they're pretty agnostic to that. That will matter, and it's certainly important. And we will care a lot about the outcome, and we have a lot of theory, but a lot of right now is theory about it that we will just, as we get close, it'll become much more clear, and it'll be much more clear, not just internally, but also externally and with other people, using and building on the system.
Well, frankly, until something like WiMAX gets up that's actually using this mechanism, it's very, very hard for us to figure out what the right fee structure is.
Right. Yeah. And that will change also as we integrate additional interop abilities that might change the pricing of interop. There's all sorts of things that is it, $2.20 or 2 cents to get an operation out over to some other chain to execute, and it kind of depends on the chain, depends on the activity, and so forth. And all that information will be visible. We will be analyzing it. We will be providing that data, or that data will be available generally. And we've seen some awesome tools from the community to be able to roll up that data as it starts to become interesting numbers. And so that we'll all have the visibility to be able to steer going forward.
Make better informed decisions.
Yeah, I was surprised at the variability already between some of these different operations, and we just have to see.
I think another big part of this is the implementation of it, and timelines of what community should kind of expect in the next revision of the tokenomics framework. We want to touch a bit on this.
So yes, so the first criteria, as I said, getting the activity is the most important thing, which is driven by apps. We are implementing the orchestration additions we need for WiMAX in order to deliver WiMAX. And initially, we'll be measuring what things happen, and we're acquiring the build for WiMAX and setting aside build to be able to cover all the fees. It is the case right now that to send a message to another chain and do all the stuff that WiMAX is currently doing, even in beta, that it pays build for that, right? And so we acquire build for WiMAX in order to pay that build. Adding the commissions on top as we have a model, or at least computing what they would be if it was at 10%, to be able to have some projections in the next couple of months, will be is the first step. And then adding ad hoc into how we're using it to accumulate that automatically on chain is probably the right first step, as opposed to doing lots of general support in the orchestration infrastructure for adjustable commission rates. It's like, no, figure out whether it's having the right economic impact. That's, as an implementer and as sort of the engineering side, that's my perspective of how we should approach it, is do the prototype version that has the right economic measurements so that we can tell that we're doing the right thing, and then build the more robust infrastructure. We could add lots of engineering to measure the ticks and counts of execution in JavaScript. We have models of that. We've looked at that numerous times over the, currently the cost of that execution would still be so small compared to tying into paying commissions on the remote stuff, that I think our implementation should be on the commissions for the remote stuff, for example. And so we will roll this out in order to, implementation wise, assuming this is the direction that the community agrees we should go in the direction, that we'll roll this out incrementally to start accumulating the economic activity and the burns, and then building out the purser for the trading engine and stuff like that.
Actually had this one come directly. You just mentioned Stewart, but can we actually go back and can you walk through that Stewart Purcell model, and how the differentiation between the usual typical fee markets that exist already? And I'll put it on screen. There you go.
Sure. Yeah, in some sense, fee market is a particular thing that a problem to be solved of, on these various chains. They want to be able to have the right gas. We want to be able to have the core application, WiMAX question, whatever it is, that is to not have a bunch of the fee logic and trading logic entangled. WiMAX gets USDC, it gets stables, it gets paid in stables, but it has to pay its fees in build. So it has to acquire build. Right now we can do that manually. That's straightforward. It's an account, but it's not a thing that we should be doing on an ongoing basis. One wants to automate that to be able to automatically acquire the build for orchestration fees automated fashion, starting from whatever token the application happens to be using. So if it's using stables, great. We can automatically acquire build over osmosis. We have the orchestration code for that. And we want to build that into a reusable component that is the steward that will make sure that whatever it is that the smart contract has to pay for its execution, it will get converted to build. The build will be put in the right place, and in order to fund these orchestration activities, and it will, get the alerts if they're running low, and do all of the stuff it needs to do to make sure that the contract can keep paying its bills as it's sort of easily just consuming orchestration services from the underlying platform. that's the primary role of the steward, is to just separate out the concerns of doing that into something that is reusable across applications. Initially, we'll just do that logic wherever we have to do it to make sure the logic is right, and then we'll boil it into this separate abstraction that makes it easily reusable. That's the core sort of use for the steward, and that's why there's one per contract, is because it has access to the fee account for that contract, and is making sure that that's topped off enough to pay for the services the contract is using.
Put another way, for those who are seeing this for the first time, the steward is a service that is offered by the chain to contracts, and contracts use that existing steward to help manage their internal and external fees flows.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's a utility.
And there's a steward per contract,
Mm-hmm.
By default, contracts could do other things, but to make sure that they've got the build they need for the orchestration operations and system operations they invoke.
Dean, do you want to contrast that with what the purser does?
Yes. So the purser, there is, this sort of, on a ship, right? There's multiple stewards for every cabin and area, and there's one purser that manages the finances of the ship. The purser has multiple roles. The two that you can see on here it's the thing that gets the funds, that gets the stake for a contract. So we'll talk about the stake in a moment. We've talked about that before, but it gets, when a contract's deployed, there is a stake that is locked up for the contract that can be slashed if the contract misbehaves, or as I refer to it, deadbeat contracts that aren't paying their bills, and so they're accruing that debt that Rick referred to earlier. The purser is the one that gets that stake and holds onto it and will obey governance instructions to slash it if that contract has been misbehaving. And it can deploy, so it holds that and returns it at the appropriate time or what have you. It also gets the fees that from the various orchestration activity on behalf of that and disperses them. So it doesn't hold on to them. It's taking the fees, and its job is to do the burn operations or pay them out to stakers, depending on the policy of the chain at the time, which might in the future be dynamic based on how much are fees compared to how much are emissions, right? And we'll worry about exactly how that should trade off in the future. The choice between that is straightforward, and we've had lots of discussions about that, and it's something that we can expand on in the future. So,
and also, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
I'll say the third role. So the first is gets the stake and manages it, and reacts to governance. The second is it disperses fees for rewards. And then the third is it's got that stake, it's got that asset, it's got that fees for a period. It can make sure that first off, it can take those stakes and get some amount of yield from them using whatever low risk yield services are available, either taking that build and staking it and just getting the staking rewards, or other things beyond that. And all of those all of the yield that it gets would go into the fees for orchestration that the purser gets to disperse, right? And so that's another element of the economy where there's a lot that we talked about there. Does it end up being a customer of WiMAX and using WiMAX to deploy it and get yield that way? Does it just do staking and get automated staking rewards? Does it do liquid staking? These are all options that mechanically are different and require support and will require implementation. But architecturally, it's contract stake is available to the purser to get to use to improve the returns from orchestration for the chain in an automated fashion, on chain, controlled by governance.
And this is one of those things that people out there who are holding the build token should be excited about, because under the old structure, really the primary source of revenue was gas fees, right? And that's nominal, as we've all agreed and we know from the beginning. Well, gas fees are still there, folks, but now in addition, there's also the surcharge, the premium on the third-party fees that are going to flow into the pockets, and there's the potential yield generated by the purser. So we've opened up two additional potential revenue streams for the chain here, both of which are likely to be significantly more meaningful than what we would have ever made off the gas side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We should add the yield to this drawing.
Probably a good idea.
Noted. Okay. Just one thing, and I know people go absolutely crazy when they see the word burn. In this particular diagram, is there, and again, don't take the example as per word, but
Sure.
can we give an example of, what would kind of trigger the burning, and a kind of what magnitude would that kind of happen?
So burning is an interesting mechanism for a couple of reasons. It's very important that on a chain like Agoric, that we are rewarding stakers and validators. We want people to stake. We want validators to be economically viable. That's really important from the security perspective. Burning benefits all token holders, whether they are staking or not, because and so there is a balance that has to be struck there around how much you reward the stakers and through them the validators versus how much you just burn the token. That's a conversation that we've had. That's a conversation ultimately, though, for the community to decide what we are most, which is why we've got both mechanisms as proposals in this and as something to suggest. We want to make sure that stakers are getting the stakers are the best actors in the system. Stakers provide economically valuable work. The taxation relationships might be different in different jurisdictions, but it's definitely important for a lot of people in the crypto economy that they are doing work to get benefit, depending on what your tax situation and your national tax regulator might be. So there's a bunch of factors that we need to. I'm excited by burns. I think burning is a fantastic mechanism, but it's not an unalloyed good, and we need to balance that with the interests of stakers and validators too.
It would be interesting to get some modeling of things to see where the sweet spot is. And frankly, until WiMAX gets out there in the wild and we see what that does in terms of fee flows, et cetera, it's going to be hard to do, but it's going to be very interesting to see.
Right. And that's one of those places where we had, I wouldn't say disagreement, but it was one of the places that it felt like there's an answer that we will understand as this percolates more.
Right.
A version is you burn up to the emissions rate,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's offsetting emissions, and then you are net neutral, and then everything else goes to the stakers or something, But then that sort of got a binary thing. You'd rather do some rates, and so I think that we'll as we get closer, we'll have a concrete proposal of what percent is burned and what percent goes to the stakeholders, or postage goes to the build stakers, and orchestration fees have a percentage that is burned versus not, or a few things like that. Those are all useful, interesting, and important, but I think that the models of it will evolve over time.
Once again, it's all about creating a mechanism that has optionality, that creates a useful design space.
Right. One of the things that I really like with relation, I have not been a fan of burning historically, because it's just sort of unalloyed. Anyone who's got tokens gets, in theory, more token value, but they don't actually appreciate it typically. But one of the things I really like is a mechanism where we end up with a cap on issuance, but we can do emissions up to the amount that's been burned, and it doesn't matter why it was burned. Right. We just, that, and this is something that, Zcash is looking at. People proposed it for Bitcoin, but it's one of those things where you can now afford to burn everywhere that it's convenient. I have now consumed this. I'm done with it. It gets burned, rather than having any wiring going, to flow it back to a place that it can be productive use of build tokens or staking security or have you, by having it, now that it's burned, that increases the amount that the economy, in the places where we all, via governance, decide we want more emissions to incentivize security or participation, that burn stuff can now go into those flows in a way that is still not a transfer from the originator, because they have no relation to the person who was providing network security. If a validator or people are staking and providing network security, that has no relation to what did someone do over here that happened to burn it. It's not a transfer. It's very much they used the service, they spent the build, it's now been consumed, and I'm continuing to provide security here, and it gives us the ability to continue to do minting while keeping a cap or a deflationary rate on supply. So I'm excited about that. We need the numbers and activity in order to have a coherent proposal.
We can guess right now, but we need data to make an informed decision.
Yeah. There's also a question for the community as well, which is that we all agree that staking needs to be economically viable, validating needs to be economically viable. Do we want to be favoring the interests of build holders or build holders who are staking more? Because we could drive all the benefits and all the value back to stakers. That's a parameter choice that the community might make. The community might make a choice to drive some of it back to stakers and some of it to all build holders.
Or not everybody can afford to stake. Dean and I went back and forth around this. I'm like, everybody should benefit. Other people.
Yeah. So and this is a choice. This is frankly a political choice that can be made by the community. Who do we want to reward the most? And Rick is right. You know, there are some people who don't stake for good reasons, and they also, we might choose to have them get some benefit too.
Okay, I think we're way over time, aren't we, Miguel?
Yeah, we're wanting to squeeze all the juice out of the fruit.
Yeah. This is how long is a piece of string discussion.
But again, we appreciate everybody watching us live right now. A very, very important conversation to have had. And again, we brought a lot of clarity to a lot of the commentary that we were receiving. But again, this ultimately in the hands of community, and we need feedback, more people joining the discussion. I think in general, there's overall more participation from everyone. So hopefully, this kind of helps motivate you to do that. And again, look back, rewatch it, reshare, tweet, do as you must to get in contact with us. We're always available. And then of course, we're always looking at the discourse to continue to have this conversation. And very important time period as we inch closer and closer to a potential WiMAX sharing with the community in general, and get more users to use WiMAX in general. And then of course big changes on the Agoric side. Just stay tuned, of course. Gentlemen, any last words? Anything we want to say before we say goodbye?
No, I'm just really excited to see one thing that excites me about this model is it's the realization of the possibilities of orchestration. The Agoric chain provides really exciting new economic models. And I think that this Litepaper demonstrates what that new design space is in a really exciting way. So the community engagement's been fantastic. I can't wait to see it in operation.
And please read the blog post on dcfoundation.io. Jason's blog post about this is really good.
And go ahead, Chris. I want to end. I was going to say, and I have to say, go to WiMAX app on Twitter and sign up for the wait list, because all of this gets driven by usage. We'll get there, and we definitely want you to want everyone in the community to use it and be excited for it. It means that the Agoric platform can really control a lot of wealth out there.
There's a new way of doing things on the horizon.
Yep.
100%. Chris, Rick, Dean, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time, of course, for joining and having this lovely discussion. And again, we hope to hop on and converse some more in the future.
And Happy New Year in case we don't see the community before then.
That's right. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. Thank you all.
Yeah. Happy holidays, Happy New Year. All right. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Fantastic conversation. Again, if you're watching us live, I appreciate it. I see all the comments kind of coming in, and it'll again it really helps to take it all in, soak it in, rewatch it, reshare it. The more you share it, the better the conversation gets. So again, if you're watching us after the fact, you could leave your comments there as well. I'm looking through them, and then those goes back to the team, and we could answer any kind of pending questions that people may have after watching. And then again, at WiMAX app, you follow that account for things related to WiMAX. And then I already shared the DCF Jason Potts blog posts from the DCF side. That link is already live in the Discord, and of course I'll share it in the X post that you're probably watching right now as well. And for those of you watching us on YouTube, I appreciate that as well. LinkedIn, the LinkedIn community is growing, so it's exciting to see people tune in on that platform as well. And again, just let us know, send your questions in, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. Again, I appreciate it, and thank you for joining us today. So I'll see you in the next one.